finishing Chapter 3. We're going to be doing a couple of things today. We're going to be finishing the chapter. We're also going to be doing a review of the chapter. And what I'm also going to be doing is going through this list with you guys in terms of how an actual unfair labor practice plays out. What you guys see on the tables in front of you will not be on the exam per se, but I want you to be aware of it because it's something we'll be covering later in the semester. So, right now we are planning on taking our first test in here next Wednesday. Guys, by show of hands, who here has Lockdown Browser already on their computers? All right, I'll be emailing you the link. If you don't have it, we'll take some time on Monday to install it. Now, on Friday and Monday, we're going to be watching a movie in this class. Now, it's based on Netflix, and it's called American Factory. So if you're not going to be here, by show of hands, who all is traveling Friday? Okay, anybody's traveling on Friday, I'm going to be expecting you to get onto Netflix sometime this weekend and watch the first 50 minutes, because we're going to be finishing it on Monday. It's a really, really good movie, and it's a documentary about what happened when a former GM factory got taken over by a Chinese manufacturer, and what it was like for some of those former union employees to get back in and adapt to a new labor scenario. So we're going to be watching that in class on Friday, and we'll be finishing on Monday. Next Wednesday will be our test. So from today, you're going to have a full week to study, and yes, I will be sending you a review sheet that encompasses everything we talked about. Just a reminder, this Friday, your next assignment is due. I'm asking you 1 to 3 pages to tell me whether or not federal workers should be allowed to unionize and organize in the United States. I'm asking you to back up your opinion with 3 sources. Don't worry about being perfect. Worry about showing me your opinions. Worry about backing them up with the sources that you are reading. Guys, a reminder, too, that this Friday we have an extra credit opportunity. For those of you who are traveling, I will offer an alternative way to earn extra credit as well. That would be the idea of doing some sort of an in-class discussion or participatory type of exercise. If you're willing to facilitate that, you can earn the extra 2 points. For those of you who are not traveling, you have to go to the actual presentation. It's worth 2 points on the test. That's this Friday. If you know other people who need CES, for example, I also encourage you to tell them about it. It's going to be a great presentation. The other thing, too, guys, this is not anything to do with extra credit. It just has to do with good for the heart and soul. Today there is going to be a suicide awareness walk and a candlelight vigil to honor the people we've lost. I know you've probably been seeing emails come around and on-campus email about it. I encourage you, if you've got time in your schedules, to consider participating. I'll be in class, but if I get some time, I'm hoping to at least make an appearance at the vigil, see what time we get done today. So that's what's going on, guys. Before we jump into finishing our material today, are there any questions? Questions or comments? Okay, sir.
Just making sure everybody knows it's from 5 to 7 at the mall.
And it's a great cause, and it's one of these things, guys. I think everybody sooner or later in life will lose a loved one to suicide, and it comes down to whether or not you knew the individuals who were honoring. It's a good thing to participate in if you are able to do so. So I encourage you very much to do that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's jump in, guys. We left off talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the follow-up in 1991. Now, we knew 1964 established the following protected classes: race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. What is noticeably absent from that act? What didn't it cover in terms of a protected class? Yes?
Handicapped, disabled people, those with impediment.
Persons with disabilities, and there's something else that's a hot topic in 21st century America that it also did not cover. Yes? Correct. So, guys, when we get from the Act of 64 and then going to 1991, 1991 added on a criminal portion of this, meaning if you discriminated against somebody on these criteria, you could also be sued and be forced to pay damages as well. Things like reinstatement, things like back pay, things like getting charged for legal fees in the courtroom. We talked about the Age Discrimination and Employment Act in 1967. In 2019 and beyond, again, why is this act so important in modern America? What's changing in our demographics, guys? The more old people or young people? This country is aging quickly because people my age keep living and we won't die. And people who are before us, baby boomers, are living well into their 80s. So again, guys, these orders were backed up by several executive orders. I don't expect you to remember the numbers on these, but the bottom line is executive orders 11246 and 11375 essentially said if you are a government contractor, you have to also adhere to these requirements in regard to discriminatory behavior as well. We get into the Vocational Rehabilitation Act of 1973. It basically meant that people who were returning to the workforce with a disability had to get some sort of assistance. This predated the ADA of 1991. But my question for you, 1973, what was happening in the world that America was involved in 1973? What were we doing outside of our borders? I know Elliot knows. What is it, Elliot?
We had troops in Vietnam.
Exactly right. And we were seeing, for the first time since the Second World War, large amounts of people coming back with physical disabilities, where they were stepping on landmines or otherwise in close combat being injured. It's no coincidence that act came out in 1973 and predates the Americans with Disabilities Act, although the ADA was more far-reaching. The Vocational Rehabilitation Act of 1973 primarily covered government and educational institutions, meaning, for example, if somebody was going to a public school, it had to be accessible. There had to be a way to get a wheelchair in. Guys, here's the trick, and we see it on this campus because we've got an old campus. We're really lucky in this building that we are fairly accessible. What would be the impediment to somebody in a wheelchair attending classes between Padua Hall and SCOTUS? Why would that be difficult for those individuals?
I mean, stairs, it's a fairly long walk.
There's no way other than going outside that you can get from one building to the other if you are in a wheelchair. Guys, I remember in the 90s seeing somebody who was in the PA program who was in a wheelchair having to push themselves outside in snowstorms to get from one building to the other. How do we get away with that? Because old buildings can be grandfathered in. But the bottom line is if you have new construction, you better make it accessible because we want to include everybody at this point in time. We talk about Social Security. Well, Social Security became a thing in 1935. This was a part of the New Deal. We were coming out of the Great Depression, and it was a way to basically say we're going to provide protection for people so when you get close to retirement age, you have a way to have an income. It also meant if your primary breadwinner was killed, that you had some sort of guaranteed income. Who was it not common to see in the workforce in the 1930s? Who typically worked out of the home, guys? Women. So we didn't see a lot of women in the workforce. So here's what would happen prior to that time. If you were a female and your husband worked in the mines and your husband were killed, you'd be relying on friends and family to basically say, are you going to provide an income for me? You're going to help me out. Social Security was one of the first things that really started to remedy that and really gave us some sort of a backup to be able to say we're going to have a backup plan. Guys, here's my question for you guys. We talk about this a lot in Biz 101, but I want to hear from you guys your opinion on this. Do you think when you retire, Social Security will still be around?
No.
Why do you say that?
Isn't it going to go insolvent in about 30 minutes?
Yeah, it sure feels like it. Okay? So we're talking about insolvency. What does Ryan mean by that? Why is Social Security not something good to count on? Anybody have any ideas? Yes?
I think the ratio of us to old people is like diminishing day by day. So the amount of money coming into our Social Security is going to keep going down.
That's exactly right. Let's say, for example, we've got this group of people who's getting ready to retire. At this point in time, for every person here retiring, there's still probably 8 to 10 people in the workforce. If we get down to the point within the next 20 years where we will, that we're getting basically where there's, for every one person retiring, there's 2 to 3 people in the workforce, how do you fund that program? What are your options? What do you think, guys? How do you fund a program like that? Corey, how do you fund a program if you've got fewer people paying into it? What do you do to those individuals? Yeah, you're going to basically raise taxes on those folks. And so if you get down to the point where we're talking 2 to 1, somebody retiring, somebody staying in the workforce, it becomes unsustainable. So basically, at some point, the system goes bankrupt. bankrupt. I think we're going to see it. If I were you guys, I would not be banking on Social Security. I know you heard this a lot from Michelle Singletary, but I absolutely agree with her when she referred to these as. People refer to them not just as benefits, but they use an E word for them. What do they call them? Entitlements. So what's the difference? If I say, hey, I'm going to give you a benefit versus this is your entitlement, what's the difference in the connotation of those two words? If I say it's, Emily, if I say I'm giving you this benefit, or Jared, I'm giving you this something to which you're entitled, who here has a greater right to that, based on the sound of the word? The person who's getting the benefit or the person who's entitled to it? Entitled. If you're entitled, it means you deserve it. It's yours. And so when we start talking about entitlements, a big part of the reason why these things survive so many politicians and political cycles goes something like this, guys. In terms of proportions of the population who vote, we take people your age, or we take people my age. In terms of total population, what percentage is likely to vote? Is it a greater percentage of your generation or mine? We tend to vote, and if you get people older than me, if you get people into their 50s and 60s and 70s, all those people vote. Retirees in particular, because they have nothing else to do other than get up in the morning and get in front of me when I'm trying to get to work. That's all they have to do. They're going to breakfast first thing in the morning. Can't stand it. They're buying lottery tickets. Lottery tickets in their pajamas at 7 a.m. in sheets. Why are you there? Why are you there? And so what it really comes down to, guys, is the reason older people have their voices heard is because they vote. And politicians will never go against AARP or anybody who has a voting bloc like that. As long as we're around, as long as older people are around, you're going to see things like the Social Security Act of 1935 stick around. Now, if you remember, we talked about the Fair Labor Standards Act several times. I want to also point this out, guys. Remember this. The Fair Labor Standards Act, in addition to setting all these things we enjoy like the minimum wage, also determined that we could no longer have child labor. So child labor still existed well into the 20th century. This act prohibited it. Then we also get into what we call the ERISA, the Employment, Retirement, and Income Security Act of 1974. That basically guarantees pensions. That makes sure your pensions are secured, and it just also means if you're retiring and your pensions go bankrupt, you've got something to fall back on. Now, we get two other big acts we're going to talk about before we get into the review. The first is called OSHA. Guys, do you guys remember Jim Lamont said he worked for an administration? What company does Jim work for? The guy who was our guest speaker. Remember, beside the mine workers, who else was he working for? A company within the United States government, and a part of the government that does what? Adam.
Looks at like the safety of mines.
Yep, the Mine Safety Health Administration, MSHA, it's called for short. That is part of a group called OSHA, and OSHA was established by the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. What this act basically meant is that if you are maintaining a workplace, it has to be safe for your employees. There can't be tripping hazards. There can't be hazards hanging out of the ceiling. OSHA can do an inspection to a company anytime somebody calls them and says basically the working conditions are unsafe. And we're going to show you videos on both these, but I want to cover the Family Medical Leave Act too. In the United States, guys, how many days of paid leave are all of us entitled to by law? None. We are absolutely not guaranteed paid time off in this country. You can hire somebody and basically say, I'm not giving you any time off at all, no paid leave. You have one fallback. If you are a full-time employee in the United States, you are covered under the Family Medical Leave Act of 1993. That means if you have to take care of a serious medical condition for yourself or for a family member, you're entitled up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave. Now here's the trick. Let's say, for example, I have 60 days of vacation saved at St. Francis University, and I take my FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act leave. They can require me to take my vacation as part of that. They don't have to just give me 12 weeks off. They can require me to take that as part of it. But they cannot deny me 12 weeks of leave, and they have to maintain a job for me when I get back. So that's meaning if you're taking care of a family member, if you've got an elderly parent, and the other part of it too, pregnancy is considered to be a serious medical condition. So females who have become pregnant or having a complex pregnancy can take up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave. But there is no guaranteed paid leave in this country. How do you guys feel about that? What do you think? Should we have paid leave in this country? What do you think? Yes?
It's just like a quick question. Why do so many companies then like extend paid time leave when you sign on your job? Just like out there races or?
I'm going to turn the question back to you because I have my opinion. Why, if you're a company, let's say, Kenny, you've got a company and Jared's got a company, and you both are looking for computer programmers, and Ryan's a computer programmer. Jared is saying, how many weeks of paid leave are you going to offer Ryan? He's a really good programmer. 15, that's good. Kenny, how many are you going to offer Ryan?
16.
16. So where are you going, Ryan?
I'm going with the more paid time off.
It's a competitive benefit. It's the idea that you're going to draw your best and brightest by giving people more options for employment. So that's really the main reason why employers offer. It's crazy some of the benefits that employers do offer. For example, Apple and big tech companies out on the West Coast are even offering what they refer to as egg freezing services for females so that they will put off bearing children. Why would Apple or Google offer those services? Why would they offer a service to? What do you think, Tanner? Why would Google say to their female employees, we'll give you egg freezing services for free? Why would they do that?
So they can work.
Exactly right. Your top earning years, where you're going to be most productive, are going to be between your ages of 18 and 40. If you're willing to put off having children until after you're 40, we'll pay for it. So the benefits these companies offer in competitive industries are crazy. So let's watch a video about each one of these guys before we're technically eligible. Now, some employers will choose to say, we'll let you take FMLA, we'll let you have some unpaid leave, but they're not legally required to. And here's the trick. Let's say, for example, if I come in and I've been working for the company for a week and discover I've got a serious illness, they're also not required to grant my FMLA because I haven't worked for 1,080 hours, I think it is, in a previous year. So not everybody's immediately just eligible for family medical leave. It's a very complicated thing. So guys, what we're going to do is we're going to, in a second here, go through our Chapter 3 review before we do a review of the process for unfair labor practices. Are there questions before we get into the review? Sir?
Someone's meeting, like the example I used, what would be stated by the employers if they wouldn't be held liable for workers' comp?
What I would do, if I were an employer, now if I were allowing somebody to work from home, employers make this mistake all the time of just saying, sure, you can work from home. No, I would require a home visit. I would require to have some sort of signed contract that basically says that this individual is going to maintain a safe work environment free of the following things. And for example, if that employee has a dog in their office and it shows up and trips them, or they trip over a power cord, that I have documentation that this person agreed to maintain a safe working environment. So most employers don't do that, though. They just assume the good graces of their employees. And I'm not saying we shouldn't let people work from home. I've telecommuted and I love it. But you've got to also put some time and thought into that to protect yourself as an employer. That's my 2 cents. But very few companies do it. So, good question. Any other questions before we jump into the review? Ma'am? Oh, wow, interesting analogy. So basically, you think they're sort of setting up their own company store system.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really, really interesting analogy. Has anybody here seen what was in the news with Amazon this morning? I apologize for anybody who's also in 201 because we're going to be talking about it up there. What did Amazon announce today they're going to be providing to their own employees? Healthcare. Amazon is going to be doing online medical care for their own employees. They're starting in Seattle, where basically if you work for Amazon, you can do at-home medical care. If they need to be seen, they'll send a nurse to this person's house. So now you're talking about a company basically being its own healthcare provider. Do you think that's a good or a bad thing? What do you think?
A good thing.
Okay.
Because in the video they also, like remember Starbucks was saying that he crunched the numbers basically and it saved them time overall. Because a normal doctor's visit takes 2 hours, but if you have a doctor on campus, it's going to take you 20 minutes at most.
Absolutely correct. Is there a chance for employers to abuse that system? I mean, for example, if I say, "Oh, Dr. Fry, I'm not feeling so good today. I think I better go home." Well, go to the student health center, get checked out. Well, you got a 99.9 degree fever. You can get through the rest of the afternoon. And so I think there is a possibility for abuse on that. Go ahead, Ken.
This
Dr. Fry let me go home. He's a good guy.
WWE, professional wrestling organization, has that already in place. There's horror stories of your own doctors telling wrestlers with staph infections and everything, just take a Z-Pack and keep working.
Oh, yeah. I think if you work for the WWE, you could have a compound fracture with a bone sticking out of the side of your arm, and they'd say, walk it off. You know, I mean, they absolutely would. But has anybody ever seen the show or the movie Inside Google? Guys, check this out. If you work for Google, they literally have rooms where you can stay overnight. All the food that they serve at Google, whether it's Starbucks or Chick-fil-A or whatever they have there, is free. They want you to stay as much as possible. They do not want you to leave. So the idea of creating a company store mentality, I think for some of the high-performing companies, I do think they want you to stick around. And they also sometimes tend to pay in stock options. Go ahead, Sarah.
It's just weird because it's not free to them at all. Like they talk about that in the video, it's just discounted.
Okay.
So, do you think that it's like that, or is it since it's a benefit you don't have to participate, that it's not like that?
Well, I think it depends on the company. I mean, I know, for example, a lot of, from what I know of Google, that stuff literally is free to the employees. If you want a coffee, you can get it. If you want lunch, you can get it. And I do think that their goal is to get as much productivity out of their people as they can. Yeah, it's kind of cool that they got ping pong tables and video games sitting around, but what they're really hoping is you'll blow off some steam, and instead of going home, you'll just stick around. So I think that there is some possibility for abuse there. Yeah.
It's crazy because like a lot of like Chinese conglomerate companies, Hyundai. You can live in a Hyundai apartment, go to the Hyundai grocery store, pick up your Hyundai brand breakfast cereal, and then go drink your Hyundai, owned beer company, and you can just live your entire life doing nothing but consuming Hyundai products.
If you look at some of these powerful conglomerates, who here drives a Subaru, by the way? Anybody have a Subaru in this room? Okay. They're owned by a company called Fuji Heavy Industries. Fuji Heavy Industries makes everything from ice cream to bicycles. And so they're huge companies. If you've ever seen somebody riding a Yamaha motorcycle, they also make guitars and furniture. So when you get into those big companies, they literally can be in most aspects of employees' lives. So yeah, I think it is something that we need to be concerned about. It's one of these things with the Amazon example. In terms of, let's think about this for a second. In terms of Amazon themselves, what's their most valuable asset? If you had to say this is what Amazon does better than anybody else, Avery, what do you think? What is Amazon's ultimate resource? What are they really good at? Totally. Online retail is the surface level, though. What Amazon's really good at is processing information. What Amazon's really good at is predicting what it is you want. What Amazon is really good at is analyzing your buying habits. So let's say, for example, you are getting your health care through Amazon. If you're an Amazon employee or somebody's bought this service, is it beyond the realm of a belief that Amazon would see your buying habits and say, Tonkin, you're ordering too much chocolate. Tonkin, you need to take these pills. Maybe this is something you'd be interested in. What they're really interested in is your information and how they can sell that to other people. So Amazon doesn't make all these products that they sell, but they like to sell those products. So I think anytime you're getting into a commercial interest that's controlling something as sensitive as your healthcare, follow the money and see where the interest goes. So I think if there's one good thing about Amazon in this aspect, it's going to be putting some of these commercial insurers on notice to say, you guys better step it up because there's a big dog in town and it's ready to compete with you. Those of us in education, it won't be, I will see it within my career that Amazon will be competing with colleges. They'll be offering online degrees. And so these things, you either become better or you differentiate. Big stuff, guys. Any other thoughts? We're going to jump into the review then if there are no other questions. So feel free to shout out the answer. All right, guys. Now this stuff, you may feel free to use your notes or your slides to answer these questions, but this is a true or false question. Under the preemption doctrine, Federal law trumps state or local law. Is that true or false? Think about the word preemption. What do you think? It is true. All right, which legal action made yellow dog contracts unenforceable? Was it the Railway Labor Act, the National Labor Relations Act, the Norris-LaGuardia Act, or the Taft-Hartley Act? Take a guess.
C.
C is correct. Anytime you don't know the answer, C is a good guess. Which of the following was a major shortcoming of Norris-LaGuardia, however? Was it that it encouraged courts to be impartial, it banned collective bargaining, it declared yellow dog contracts unenforceable, or provided no agency or mechanism for enforcement? What do you think? Take a guess. D is correct. It was a great idea, but if you don't have rules, what's it matter? All right, a contract requiring a worker to refrain from organizing. Is that a black dog, yellow dog, blue dog contract, or a non-compete clause? It is. We just talked about yellow dogs, Labradors. Which law provided framework and enforcement for the Norris-LaGuardia provision? So the act had no teeth, so we had to give it some teeth. What gave it those teeth? Was it the Sherman Antitrust Act, the National Labor Relations Act of 1935, the Clayton Act, or the Sarbanes-Oxley Act? It's okay not to know. It's a review. What do you think? Go ahead, Todd. He is correct. All right. Will somebody tell me in their own words, currently, why are GM workers on strike? What are they striking? Yes.
They want more health care and better job security.
Exactly right. They want to also, I would remember this too, guys. They also want to make sure that there's a path for temporary workers to have a way in. GM, on their side of things, wants flexibility. All right. A shop where now what's the best answer here? Don't think too much about it. A shop where you must be a member of a union to work there. Is that a union shop, an open shop, a closed shop, or an agency shop? It is. If you had said, for example, it was a closed shop, technically you're correct as well, but union shop is the best answer. The Labor Management Relations Act is also known as what? Is the Sherman Antitrust Act, the Taft-Hartley Act, the Clayton Act, or the Sarbanes-Oxley Act? Elliot, I can see it's right on the edge of your tongue. What is it, Elliot? It is B. All right. This act required secret ballots for union officers. Always trust your first instinct. This act required secret ballots for union officers. Is it Sherman Antitrust, National Labor Relations Act of 1935, the Clayton Act, or the Landrum-Griffin Act? Take a guess. Guess is actually, did you say D or did you say B? D is correct. The agency that administers the Labor Management Relations Act, is that the NLRB, the DOL, the IPA, or the KOL? That's a very good guess. IPA is the most fun of all of these, but it's cold and frosty, but it does not administer the act. Which company's store did our guest speaker mention? What was the name of this company's store? Anybody remember? It is. How'd you remember that? Very good. Look at this building. By the way, can anybody tell me what was a unique architectural feature of this building other than the fact that it looks like a haunted house? Yes. So you could push the guys down the stairs and knock them down if you had to. Very good. All right. How many members are in an NLRB panel? Are there 3, 5, 6, or 7? B is correct. By the way, guys, do they pick them all at once or do they stagger them? And why do they do that, guys? Exactly. Here's a question I did not ask, but are they elected or are they political appointees? You got it. So whoever's in office at the time, the president can decide that composition. True or false? Family business is largely excluded from the Labor Management Relations Act. That's true or false? That is true. You can work somebody as much as you want if they work in your family business most of the time. True or false? Salary employees are generally eligible for overtime. That is false. Hourly people are. All right. To be exempt under the Fair Labor Standards Act, to be a salary employee, how much do you have to earn per week? Is it $355, $455, $679, or $979? C is correct. Now, it used to be way lower than that. It used to be way down to about $355. An employee working alone can be considered to be taking part in a concerted activity if or that equals the Interborough Doctrine, the Yellow Dog Doctrine, the Pullman Doctrine, or the LaGuardia Doctrine. What we're talking about here, if an employee can be considered to be representing their entire union, even when they're operating by themselves, what do we call that? What doctrine is that? A is correct. The person accused of committing an unfair labor practice, is that the charging party, the respondent, the plaintiff, or the accused? B is correct. Yeah, you got to respond to the accusations levied against you. All the following are potential forms of affirmative relief action except what? Is it reinstatement, restoration of seniority, decertification of the union, or a civil lawsuit? What can the government do for you? There's one that the government cannot do on its own, that we never talked about in class. It's actually D. So civil lawsuit would be an independent action. All right. An employer acting in a parental way, do we call that paternalism, maternalism, chauvinism, or existentialism? A is correct. Existentialism is a philosophy. True or false? Unions believe that current Labor Management Relations Act enforcement is fair and equal. Are they happy with the way the laws are working for them? It is false. They are not happy. The first comprehensive collective bargaining law was that the Taft-Hartley Act, the Railway Labor Act of 1926, the LMRA, or the LaGuardia Act, which was the first comprehensive one. It was very specific to an industry. It is B. And a lot of the groundwork that was laid in the Labor Act of 1926, the Railway Labor Act, got put into LMRA as well. Why, and this is an open question, guys, why are railroads and airline workers' unions so closely regulated? Yes?
Because if they went on strike, it would disrupt the whole country.
It's because our economy counts on these unions. All right, which law stressed reasonable accommodation? Was it ERISA, Civil Rights Act of 64, Civil Rights Act of 91, or the ADA of 1990? You have to accommodate for people. D is correct. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Which attribute is not protected under the Civil Rights Act? Is it sexual orientation, race, religion, or national origin? Correct. Which act requires employers to give notice of workforce reductions? Is it the Taft-Hartley, the RICO, the Sherman Antitrust, or the Warren Act? It is the Warren Act. All right, which act banned child labor? It is actually B, correctamundo. And that is our review. And guys, that went a little longer than expected, so we have not enough time to cover the unfair labor practices. We're going to cover that probably when we start our next chapter. The material in the handout is not on the test, so don't worry about it. On Friday, we're going to be watching the first half of American Factory. For those of you who are traveling, I will send you the name of the program. I will trust you to use somebody's Netflix account to watch the first half of it. We're going to watch half on Friday, half on Monday, test next Wednesday. I'll also be sending you the link out for Lockdown Browser if you don't have it, and I'll be sending you a copy of the review slides. I'll see you on Friday.